Welcome to today's episode of Decisions Now. I am your host, Erin Pearson, alongside Black Veatch. Today, we're very excited to welcome Josh Edwards, who is the Global Data Science and Operations Director for Black Veatch, which is a global engineering, procurement, and construction company. So Josh brings in a range of experience in technology, analytics, and data science to the organization. He's currently focused on leading the company-wide data modernization and related change management initiatives while he's there. So Josh, we're so excited to have you on today. Thank you for joining us.
Excited to be here.
So just to jump in, Josh, one of the things that we're going to be talking quite a bit about today is establishing an AI and data science practice in an organization. So, a pretty basic question to just start this off is, how would you recommend companies get started when they're looking to build or integrate an AI practice?
Yeah, for sure. I think it's important to look at the common obstacles that face many AI programs. The first being around like a very rigid business structure and investment framework that doesn't allow for innovation. So you've got to tackle that one first if you haven't already. And a good way to do that is to tap into your existing innovation efforts. If not, you have to establish one and make sure you've got the right investment framework for that. The second, I think, is just lack of awareness around AI, especially for the board and executive leadership. So any change management programs, education that you can put in place for them will be helpful down the road. And then thirdly, I think you can look at your automation program if you have one in place and look at the health of that. And if that is not going well, that doesn't bode well for your AI efforts. So you need to spend a little time there and kind of understand the cultural acceptance of that automation program. And then lastly, I would say the fourth common obstacle is lack of in-house skills for machine learning, how to leverage AI. So finding the right partner to jumpstart that is really important.
Oh, that's a great framework, Josh. The first one resonates pretty well, with me personally too, is from an investment kind of decisioning standpoint, right? Which one do you pick?
Sure.
And how you, I think you and I, when we chatted earlier, you said there's probably one or two shots to get this right. So what do you think is driving the desire to build these practices? And why does it
Well,
have a high failure
yeah,
rate?
sure. I think it's a losing proposition to wait for AI to come to you, right? So a lot of companies recognize that. There's been tremendous success in many industries right now. Chat GPT, Dolly, most recently. So the generative AI is getting a lot of press, and our leadership is seeing that and wanting to move forward with AI. But it's really important, and there's a couple things you need to put in place. The first is to understand that AI is not a magic bullet for your business. So you've kind of got to set expectations back a little bit because their reference points are ChatGPT, right? Wanting to replace probably their customer service function with that right away, which we know is not quite possible yet. And the second is to look at the foundation of AI, which is data. So if you don't have a strong like data engineering function, you don't have a strong data governance, if you don't have data quality improvement programs in place, you need to put that in place right now. And then the third is it's helpful to look at what your peers and partners are doing with AI and making sure you got the right technology stack, Rigby.
Mm-hmm.
And then the third, I would say, engage the business and start small. So you have to have sponsorship within the business. And a great way to do that is through AI workshops. So make sure you go through the ideation phase, get the right charters, prioritize it through your AI governance council, and then send it to your AI team. And then I guess the last I would say is it's so important to align your AI effort, and this goes without saying, but we often forget it, is with your business operating model and strategy, and that's what gives all this effort purpose. Now, I think what happens is folks don't have or companies don't have a good portfolio of AI projects, and they end up striking out on one or two projects. It's my personal belief you've got to have a basket of these projects, and within that basket you can return anywhere from like 3x to 5x ROI.
Would you say, Josh, that some people want to innovate for innovation's sake, and that's one of the things that leads them to failure.
Yeah, for sure. There's a lot of low value, kind of shiny AI efforts. And they can be good starting points, but you can't finish there. And an example of that would be, sentiment analysis around your brand. Very easy to do with natural language processing, put it on a time series, understand the polarity of the conversation around your brand. It's very hard to action or assign value to. So that typically fizzles out fast. Or typically your computer vision projects, so supervised machine learning, it's an easy place to start, but it's a hard place to derive really hard value from. So for sure, Aaron.
Yeah. And I actually wanted to key into something you said a few minutes ago also, which is you said what some of the biggest obstacles when people are starting. One is getting buy-in from executive teams or from the board. Another one is skill set. So I'm gonna have, I guess, two separate questions within here. But
Sure.
are you seeing that because you have things like it's very timely right now, January 2023, to have ChatGPT? Everybody's talking about it. From an executive standpoint, are you seeing that people are more willing to talk about it and more willing to take on projects? And then similarly, just go to my other question, is there's also a lot of new, similar to ChatGPT, but like there's a lot new open source technology that people can start leveraging, they can start using. Are you finding that the low code or no code is actually making it easier for people to get into this world, and you're finding more talent, or is it the reverse that's happening?
Yeah, so let's unpack your questions. I think the first one with the Chat GPT, obviously we're all benefiting from the hype of that, and I think that's a good thing, right? But following that, I think, there needs to be expectation setting and an education of your executive leadership that this is a journey that you go on with AI. It doesn't happen overnight. I mean, if you look at the financials, a Chat GPT, they're spending $3 million a day to have that available for us to experiment on. That's quite the investment that most of us can't make. I think a lot of the low code, no code tools, in particular, a lot of the auto ML capabilities that are being rolled out can allow for very rapid experimentation in that phase, right? So it gives you more swings at the ball, if you're to take a baseball analogy, at bats, because you can very quickly understand the value behind your data. It'll kind of choose the algorithm for you that you can use to justify further investment and further refinement of those capabilities and algorithms.
Yeah, I think one of the key issues in the past, I mean, because I don't want to talk more about ChatGPT, but GPT-3 existed prior to that. It just uses it. It just made it more
Right,
accessible to the general public before it was accessible to the developers through an API. So
right.
the awareness factor definitely is helping the industry get that AI cool factor, but then it ends kind of right there. You have to look at the
Yeah.
business outcomes and create something that's more narrower and not a general AI machine.
Yeah, yeah. And there's that temptation. So something like Chat GPT is like, sitting down for, a five-course dinner and going right to the dessert. So you've got to make sure you step through like the proper processes and get the right nutrition before you indulge on dessert.
I like that. I'm going to use that in my next meeting with
Good
the
Okay.
sales
analogy.
guys.
So how do you know when you are building your initial AI practice, how do you know when you've actually got it right, that you have all the right pieces in the bucket, that you can start scaling it?
Yeah, I think you can look for some indicators from your program. One, if you have a healthy backlog of AI charters and ideas, and the business is engaged. Rigby hit on this in his previous comment. You have realized value from the project that you can point to all the way through the P&L is very important. I mean, those are some indicators of a successful program. On the programs that aren't so successful, they're lacking business sponsorship. You can also look at your program. If you have a bunch of projects that can't get to the finish line, and what do I mean by that? You can't operationalize them into a system or a standalone product. They just kind of die at the idea phase. Typically, your program has a problem.
Okay. And there's also this whole notion of kind of monetizing the AI practice too. Now, to your point, of course, the business outcomes and showing the ROI is a key piece. But what are the typical use cases they could get started with versus building, or building on their own, or finding something off the shelf in the market?
Yeah, so I'm biased a little bit just based on my experience. I think I think you want to start with the customer, at least I do, right? So customer loyalty, incremental revenue. I think those are fantastic areas to start around the customer.
Mm.
So it could be a sales program that you increase the conversion rate. It could be customer retention, anything around there. Also like product development. So dealing with product quality. A typical use case there will be emerging quality issues, especially if you're launching a new product introduction in the marketplace. You can get in front of some of those warranty issues, some of those customer pain points. And the third area ripe kind of for use cases is around supply chain, which we've all lived through. There's a lot of work there, particularly you can do supplier rationalization, you can do parts rationalization, and probably the third area is you can do like contract rationalization for liabilities and terms and conditions. I've been part of a really successful project that took like 10,000 contracts. So we've taken two buyers 5 years to pour through those, doing a two a day. We're able to do that in 3 months and save the company about $20 million in cost. Um, it's important to measure your value on the project, and I think there's three distinct stages. The first stage, before you kick off that project, you've got to estimate the value that it's going to bring. Typically, that's a hard line value. So that's your estimated value. If you're familiar with the safer agile methodologies, that's your T-shirt sizing exercise. And then if that project gets picked, you're in kind of, the throes of the project, and you either identify additional value or additional costs that you have to occur on that project. So you refine the estimated number. That's kind of your new bogey, your new estimated. And then the third is, you push that project in production, and that's your realized value. So you have your control plan in place to capture that value. I think there's a fourth bucket that's often underestimated, and that's just the value that you can bring back into your AI or data science team through going the exercise of developing a derived data set or building out a new capability that they can reuse on next projects. So I think it's important to capture that too.
And the reuse, I think you bring up a good point, right? Especially, I mean, in software, that's pretty common. You always build to reuse in most
Right.
scenarios. But in AI, I think that's a relatively new concept. So the rationalization examples you just gave, right? Would you be able to create a base model for a recommendation engine or rationalization engine, and then you kind of further fine tune it for each of those use cases? And do you do that at the forefront, or do you come to that realization after you do number one?
Yeah, I think you always, Rigby, you go to the cupboard and see what I've done before. Where is it a like problem,
Mhm.
and you look for reuse right off the bat.
Right off the bat. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, makes sense.
So when you're looking at the when you're looking at these models and you're estimating your value, Rigby and I were actually in a conversation earlier today where we were talking about the standard value that people bring in, and like you typically measure ROI based on the financial value that something brings. When you are estimating value, are you also looking at other parts of the business, like overall, like if the ESG score is improving, or if
NPS or
yeah,
CSAT
NPS,
scores go up.
yeah,
They're like soft
exactly.
metrics. You don't see money on it,
Yeah.
but you might lose money because of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. If you're going to establish a program that's going to last through the business cycles, it has to be based on hard value. Now, that doesn't preclude capturing the soft value like ESG or CSAT scores. Those are very important, but you've got to have a pathway, at least my belief is, to realized value.
Yeah. I mean, so you're okay. I think what I'm getting or taking away from that is there's always a hard metric tied to it anyway. So just focus on both, right?
Yeah, focus on both.
Mm-hmm.
You need to capture both,
Yeah.
but you need to lead with hard value. At the end of the day, imagine yourself in front of the CFO.
Yeah.
What does she or he care about?
Oh,
Yeah.
So you've got to be
churn
able to.
rate is a hard metric. So
Yeah,
your CSAT goes down, guess what? Your churn's going to go up, right? So
that's right.
so you get
That's
a
right.
hard metric every time. Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah, and I think that's where attribution models can help out with some of that thinking, right?
Mm-hmm.
Create some of those pathways.
Mm.
So, from your experience, then, how long does it really take to show the realized value when you're looking at your AI program?
Yeah, I like to target, Aaron, 6 to 9 months. I think that's the attention span of the business where you've got to deliver that first tranche of value for the organization. Anything over 12 months, you lose the attention of the business. And once you lose the attention, you lose the following investment of that. So I'd be curious on what you guys think about that.
I actually almost feel like it's kind of long from my experience, especially if it's something new and experimental. I mean, I come from the marketing world, but for us, it's very much, I mean, you can show if something's working within a few days to a week, and in some cases, naturally, some
Right.
things, or if you're trying to be more strategic, it takes time to get things off the ground. But there's certain things that you have to fail fast. So I was actually going to see, are there milestones before you actually hit the true ROI value that you can show success and achievements along the way that you would recommend implementing before you get to that 6 to 9 month timeline?
Yeah, 100%. So the 6 to 9 month was from experimentation to delivery in production. All right. So end to end. And in between that, you need to have, at least my belief is, you need to have a gated investment framework. So for each gate, for that another round investment, you've got to show a pathway and the value accrued to that point. And if there's sometimes the projects are shut down after kind of that first gateway, just because the data is not available, the pathway to value maybe has closed because of a ERP or system upgrade, and that within itself is a win, as you said, Aaron. Like, okay, that opportunity no longer exists. Let's take the next opportunity on the backlog and experiment with it for sure.
Rigby, I'd be interested from your perspective. Josh's question also, what do you think of the timeline?
Yeah, I mean, from inception to production, that sounds about right. The 6 to 9 month frame. Even in our experience, and Josh, our team works on quite a bit of AI models, and for our customers, the inception to the initial milestone is typically in weeks, because then we can
Yeah.
prove it out and say, hey, the data is available. There's a POC. Here's the potential value that you could realize. But you do it for
That's
one
right,
segment or one region or whatever, right? Whatever that segmentation is. But then for you to scale across, because in a recent example that we went through, we had a POC that was successful, but the moment we put it in production, we realized the compute power that we had estimated didn't work out. So the cost suddenly went up, right? And so
Right.
we had to go back and kind of make it more efficient to keep it within the original cost constraints. And so that actually takes time. The operationalization seems trivial, but it's not. Every time you hit some
Right.
kind of a hurdle. So I
Yeah.
agree. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the last mile is the most difficult for AI or data science projects.
Mhm.
It's hard.
Yeah, especially because you can't deploy it. I mean, you have to give it some sort of a touch and feel of front end. Could be a product, could be an API,
Right.
it could be a tool for all we know, right? But it still needs that manifestation of the usage, user experience on top of
That's
that.
right.
Yeah.
And that takes time.
One of the things also that you mentioned, Josh, was that fourth point that you had, which, by the way, I will say I like that you're dividing everything into like 1, 2, 3, etc. Very, very concise. But in the fourth point, you had mentioned you want to bring value back into the AI, or potentially you could say that you want to reuse some of the technology so you can be more efficient as you scale and as you improve over time. So what are some
Right.
ways that you're putting that into practice?
Yeah, for sure. So that I'd say that's an evolution, right? So making sure that you have the right practices in place within your AI team to capture code, capture best practices, making sure the models are going through a review process that, looks for bias within the algorithm, also looks for robustness of the algorithm. So making sure it's been tested against the right data set. Making sure that you're capturing those project artifacts as you go through the project in each gated function, that they can be easily found again and reused, I think is an important part of the process too, Aaron. So,
Cool.
for example, we've recently implemented GitHub within our data science team to put in some of that rigor and check in, check out, code reuse, what have you.
Nice.
It's cool. So, what are some of the projects that you have going that you're most excited about?
Yeah, the one that I'm most excited about, it's actually in partnership with you all, Evalueserve. It's our safety analytics project. And safety is an important cultural component of Black and Veatch. So it's been part of our DNA for over 100 years. Um, so it's important in that regards. Also, we have a deep, rich data set around safety incidents. So being part of our culture, we had the processes and procedures to capture those incidents and the data and what have you. So we're finishing a very promising project together that predicts the severity and propensity of safety incidents based on geography, based on weather, based on worker profile, based on project type, based on project phase. So it's very promising at this point. Super excited.
No, that's exciting. And I'm assuming that, of course, went through the framework you mentioned of understanding the ROI. Is this the right business outcome we need? And and
That's
kind of
right.
going through
Yep,
that process.
that's
Um,
right.
so then, of course, there are different sizes of companies that have similar requirements, right? Companies under 4 billion, for example. How do they hit it right? The larger ones we know, like we've seen Microsofts and OpenAI's of the world,
Yeah.
that invest billions of dollars. But for companies smaller than that, how do they start with the ROI? Is it supposed to be in millions, or can it be a few hundred thousands that they save, right? As a starting
Yeah.
point.
Yeah, I think it needs to scale up and down, back to your point, Rigby, but I would start by leveraging a strong, trusted partner because they can bring the use cases and they can keep you out of the rabbit holes that AI brings. And then once again, just to reiterate, I would start with your business operating model, and most of them have the customer at the heart of that. I would start at those use cases because they're easily measurable, right? You can find them in your P&L. So that's how I would start,
Cool.
and then I'd take advantage of some of the cloud platform data science tech stacks. So whether it's SageMaker from AWS, whether it's GCP, Google Cloud Platform, just leverage those right off the box to get some out of the box to get some velocity.
Right. Yeah. You get time to value much
Hmm.
sooner. And
For
I
sure.
guess you kind of touched on it, but the flip side of that, right, is what should you not do? Any anecdotes there of your experience in the past?
Yeah. So, what I wouldn't do is I wouldn't do AI in isolation, meaning like, hey, especially if you're coming from an information technology group, I would not cook up an AI solution without the right business sponsorship.
Mm.
So making sure you've got the right business sponsorship, they're involved in day one, and it's their ideas, and they're providing the funding, and they can stand behind and articulate the value that this project is going to bring to bear. That's how I would start. I think the other thing I would add, I mean, if you think about the Davenport model, so descriptive analytics,
Hmm.
predictive, prescriptive AI, there's a tendency to go right to the top. Like, hey, I want that shiny object. I want to do AI without understanding that you need a strong data engineering team. You need to know your data, the ins and outs, understand the quality of the data. Doesn't need to be perfect, but you need to understand the quality of your data. So you really need to step through that Davenport model to do AI right.
Yeah, I like the 5-course example you mentioned earlier. So
Yeah,
you
exactly.
can't skip to the dessert.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, you lose the whole experience.
You do. Yeah, exactly.
So just to drill into that a little bit more, if you are, and to tie two of your points together. So if one of the key things is to get the business buy-in, and then another key thing is to start with a high value use case that you had mentioned, who would you say would that key, or in your experience, has there been a key stakeholder that is really pivotal in getting them on board before you get the rest of the organization? Like, for example, could it be with like your sales team or your customer success team or somebody that's customer facing that you can really drive that initial ROI with? Once you get them on board, do you see there's less red tape in moving forward, or do you have a different experience with that?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting question. In my experience, it's less role based.
Mm-hmm.
So, it could be your CMO, it could be your chief operating officer, it could be your CIO, it could be your CFO. But in reality, it's that executive leader that is using AI in their everyday life, maybe through a virtual assistant, and they understand that, that's natural language processing. There's probably a predictive engine behind that. So they're already kind of familiar with that technology and they're thinking of ways to bring it to the business, and they're willing to promote that and drive that change. And ultimately, it's a business process change. So you need that strong leader to emerge from your organization.
Yeah, and I think just to add to that, Josh, I mean, one of the observations I've had is organizations that succeed with some of these AI initiatives are
Mhm.
also consumers of these AI products
That's right.
themselves. So,
That's
as
right.
simple as, for example, we actually have an HR tool that predicts if someone's unhappy within the
Okay.
organization. And so that at least gives a chance for the manager to have a chat proactively. And it kind of
Right.
flags them and say, hey, this person's probably at risk, or people to talk, or whatever we have a term internally. Now, the fact that
Yeah, that's
everyone's
right.
using that also kind of gives them the sense that, oh, AI is not like something pie in the sky. This is real. I'm using it, and therefore, when
Yeah.
I turn around and look at my customers, I'd want to give them the same experience from my services and products.
That's 100%. And I would say if you find yourself in your organization where you don't have that,
Hmm?
I mean that's your sign that you probably need an AI executive update,
Mm.
right? And just kind of walk through, hey, this is Dolly. Let's create, our own brand using it, right? What does Dolly think our brand image? And walk them through that, and walk them through Alexa,
Mhm.
and walk them through Siri and what have you to help educate them.
Absolutely.
I think that's fun. It's also a fun activity. I think you could also, if you, not just on the executive level, but I mean, imagine if you have like thousands of people at your company and you're trying to
Yeah,
update them and increase their skills. I think having these, especially these generative AI pieces that are
right.
fairly intuitive to use, I think it's very easy to use them simply. I think it takes somebody a little bit more to use them in a more advanced way, but I think it's exciting, it's fun, and you can potentially create fun challenges within your company of like a
For sure.
branding or like a new campaign, or who could
Mhm.
write the best blog post using ChatGPT or something, and you could do some kind of award,
Yeah,
have some fun with it to make it not scary and not to make it feel like things are taking over,
yeah,
but to make it more fun and say, here's how it can improve your work and your efficiency.
yeah. It's quite incredible, isn't it? Chat GPT.
Yeah,
It
Yeah,
is.
it
Yeah.
is. Well, Josh, we're pretty much at time here for today. So, my last question for you is just if you had any final words of wisdom or pieces of advice and somebody looking to build out their AI or data practice. We went through a lot of tips today, but if you had one
sure.
thing for them to take away, what would that be?
The first would be if AI is not part of your digital transformation program, you're doing your digital transformation wrong. So it needs to be a heart and center of that. And then the second thing is that data underpins all of that. So take whatever investment that you're making in data and times it by 10. That's where it needs to be.
Cool.
Like that.
All right, Josh, well, I'm going to go turn around and ask for 10 times more budget to get my data in order. And I'm going to use your quote to get that. So, Josh,
Super.
It was great to have you on today. Really enjoyed the conversation. I think you broke down all of the elements really nicely as well. So appreciate your level of organization to everything.
Likewise. It's been great. Thank you.
Thanks, Josh.
Access the full episode of Decisions Now on our website, and don't forget to subscribe to Decisions Now podcast today.